Welcome back. This is the continuing ABC News special report. We have been on the air for a day and a half now, and we are going to continue with our coverage of this national disaster for the United States and what has happened in the course of this day from the point of view of government, point of view of transportation, the point of view of the search for victims and those who might still be rescued in New York and at the Pentagon outside Washington, what has happened to that United Airlines flight crashed in Pennsylvania. There's a huge amount of material which we've managed to gather in the course of the day about where the government certainly is going, where the investigation is going, where the search and rescue operation is going, and one could argue ultimately where the country appears to be going, not yet, maybe about 36 hours after this attack on the country as a whole. Let us begin this review with some of the sights and the sounds of today in America.
We've got a lot of heavy debris. We're really just on top of the pile. We can't even, there's just a lot of crevices and holes, things you can look down into. You really can't see. The visibility is real poor. A lot of smoke, a lot of heat coming off of the debris. We found 2 Port Authority workers were trapped. We got one out alive about 1 o'clock this morning, and then we got another one out about 5:30 this morning.
I need more regulators. Got any more regulators, non-rebreathers, and O2 tanks.
Okay. All the way down.
The damage is incalculable, but you know, one human life is worth more than all that damage put together.
We've been in hospitals all day since yesterday, so if anybody could help us, there he is again, Sean.
He started yesterday to work.
Yesterday was his first day back.
Yeah, first day. And he don't come back no more to the house.
And that's what it looks like at Lower Manhattan at this time. It's 5 minutes after 5, 5 minutes after 2 in the west. as the search there continues. We've heard today from the Secretaries of Defense and State and Transportation. We've heard from the Director, the Attorney General. We've heard from the Director of the FBI. We've heard from the Mayor of New York and the Governor of New York, among other people. And that's before you begin to think of all the people we have talked to in the course of this day who have been reporting the investigation itself. And we shall get through that in full measure, I hope, before local stations around the country who are dealing with other issues come back to us. Want to go downtown Manhattan now to ABC's George Stephanopoulos, who has been down there getting as close as one can to this search and hopefully rescue operation. George.
Peter, thank you very much. Yes, I just spent the last 40 minutes in the ground zero area where the two towers of the World Trade Center were. Walked right down this street, down the left, and then entered what has become, as you said, an enormous search operation. But Peter, I can't say from what I saw that it's much of a rescue operation. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people working there. Police, firemen, doctors, nurses, medics, rabbis in yarmulkes, monks in their habits, all working, iron workers in their unions, all throughout this ground zero area. Let me just talk you through with you as I walked around the perimeter. First of all, I entered on the left side, and the landmark you might know there, Peter, is the Trinity Church, the oldest church in Manhattan, which has a small cemetery just in front of it. That cemetery is now covered in ash. The gravestones are all broken. It is quite an eerie sight. Then you walk down the perimeter, the Millennium Hotel, many windows broken, but the hotel is still standing. Secondly, the Century 21 building, also many windows broken up and down the side of the building, but the building seems to be in decent shape structurally. Same with the Brooks Brothers building, which is the next building on the left side, on the east side that would be, of the World Trade Center. That is now being used as a morgue, but I didn't see any bodies in there at the time. To my right then, on the east, was the space where the two towers once stood, and now they are just huge piles of rubble, Peter, with the exception of the skeleton of the second South Tower. And that was one of the strangest sights, Peter, as I approached that from the south and you look at it from Greenwich Avenue. It looks like that famous scene you might remember from the movie Planet of the Apes, just a superstructure sticking out of a pile of sand and stone. I walked from there out on to the rubble. It is basically cool, covered with papers, although there are various small pockets of fire smoldering in various parts of the ground zero. The center of all the activity is the heart of that skeleton. There's a fairly large fire now burning inside that structure. A long line of firemen, parallel lines of firemen, are on either side of that. They're trying to spray it down with hoses, and that's where the cranes are also doing the bulk of their work. That seems to be the center of any organized activity. For the rest of the area, Peter, basically you have many of these groups working in posses. A group of 2 iron workers will go out on their own, picking through the rubble, looking for any signs of life. There are several canine search dogs, German shepherds. I counted about a dozen. But Peter, they're not showing any sign that they see any life, which is what they're trained to sniff out. So most of the work I saw at this point, Peter, is picking through the rubble, clearing away large pieces of debris, most notably the cars, fire trucks, ambulances, police cars. Other cars are being piled up on the south end of ground zero. But from what I could say, just to sum up there, no rescue.
Thank you very much, George Stephanopoulos, who, as I said, is as close pretty much to the actual, hate to keep calling it ground zero, but that's really what it is as we can get. And just one note, there's always a note of hope in circumstances like this. ABC's Bill Blakemore, who was with us earlier, and I've talked many times about covering earthquake. Now, this is not an earthquake. This is not an act of nature, of course, but we've been in circumstances before where buildings of enormous size have fallen upon themselves, and it has caused the kind of despair that we feel all over the country today. But in time, search and rescue operations perhaps in this instance to take a moment of poetic license with the Statue of Liberty looking over her from not many hundreds of yards away from this site. They will find, as they have found in other circumstances in many parts of the world, that people manage to survive under the rubble for long periods of time. And this is, of course, why the mayor of New York and the governor and the president and all of the members of the national government as well are so obviously reluctant to say that this tragedy now has some kind of numerical dimension to it that we can put on in terms of thousands or hundreds of people whose lives have been lost. It's just simply something worth keeping in our minds all the time. Don't like the word miracles very much, but miracles actually do happen. Cynthia McFadden is in the same part of New York City today. She has been for much of the time waiting for people to be rescued and come out, but in the process she has managed to appreciate as well as anybody can on the edge of this just how difficult it really is. Cynthia?
Well, Peter, we have been briefed once again by officials here at St. Vincent. The scene behind me looks considerably different than it did earlier in the day when you saw all those empty beds lined up here. This was where triage was going to happen, right here on the street. They've moved inside for a couple of reasons. One of those reasons is that the wind has shifted in New York, and that plume of smoke is now coming north toward the city. Several of the doctors briefed us saying that they were very concerned about the noxious gases. It's basically electrical fire smoke coming this way, and they are concerned about that, so they have moved their triage inside. Having said that, there are very, very few patients coming here, mostly rescue workers, but there are some new numbers. 426 people have been brought here to St. Vincent's. 73 of those people are fire and rescue workers. 95 people have been admitted to the hospital, and approximately 62 or so of them are in critical condition. I have with me here, Peter, a young woman who is hoping very much that this is still a rescue mission and not just a recovery one. She is 20 years old, and she is looking for her mother. Her name is Evita Ortiz. Evita, tell me about your mom.
My mom, her name is Rosemary Carlson.
Let's show the picture.
She's 40 years old. She has blonde hair, hazel eyes. She's 5'4". She worked in building 1 of the World Trade Center buildings. She was on the 79th floor. I last spoke to her around 9:40 something. Her friend spoke to her at 10 o'clock. We never heard anything about her afterwards. She has 6 kids.
You have 5 brothers and sisters. You have a 5-year-old sister. You're the oldest?
I'm the oldest, and the littlest is 5 years old. So.
Do the children know what's happened at this point?
The older ones do, but the little ones are too small really to understand right now. I guess they will soon. I'm just hoping that I mean, she was on the 79th floor, and I heard that people as high as the 90th floors were evacuated down. So I'm hoping that she was able to make it out by then. I don't know.
Now, you spoke to your mother. Tell us about the conversation.
At about 9:40 something, and she told me she loved me. She told me to take care of the kids. She told me she was waiting. They told them to stay inside the offices. So she was waiting for someone to come get her. And that's the last time I heard from her. So
we of course wish you luck, and we have your number if anyone should recognize her from this photograph. Peter, there are heartaches here. Family members have assembled here at St. Vincent's. I have a stack of pictures of family members, of people who are hunting for loved ones.
Thanks, Cynthia.
It's very painful.
Much. Cynthia McFadden, very painful for everybody involved. Let's go straight back to George Stephanopoulos.
Hello, can anybody hear us?
Yes, George, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Can anybody hear us?
Yes, George, go ahead. Talk, George. Yes, George.
Does the cell phone work? I'll call.
No, don't be surprised at this, folks. This is modern communications at the best of times, and these are, of course, the worst of times. But George Stephanopoulos clearly has something he wants to say in a hurry, and we'll just hang here for a second until we're able to make contact with him. There's another example of a young woman looking for her mother. All I had to do was turn around to my email a short while ago to find that colleagues of ours also looking for friends and relatives. George, can you hear me?
Peter, now I can hear. I'm sorry, we have a great deal of sound trouble here. This whole area now is being evacuated. We've gotten conflicting reports on why. I just spoke with one of the firemen who is being evacuated from the Ground Zero site, and their concern is that South Tower, which I told you was burning inside, they're now concerned that it might collapse or maybe even explode. So now they're evacuating, as you see, this whole area. Just a few minutes ago, we saw several police and firemen running out of the area. They are asking us to leave in a few minutes. So we do have something of a new situation here. As we get more information, we'll let you know.
George, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now, Peter.
What do you mean precisely by the South Tower in this instance? The South Tower has already collapsed.
The South Tower of the World Trade Center, which still, you see that superstructure. And they now think it's going, Peter. They want us to leave. I'm sorry, Peter, I have to go.
Okay, George, just keep your microphone with you for a second. To be honest, we're not absolutely sure what particular structure he means. If he's talking about the one right in front of him, you can see that search and rescue workers are still standing around it in a fairly calm. I can't say that they're calm, but they're certainly still standing around on the edges of it. You can see a large, some sort of a large machine pulling away material. It may mean that George may be referring to a structure which is deeper inside the zone at the moment. But deeper inside that zone, you can see people still standing in place, and the tension seems to be on the outer perimeter of this immediate zone of tragedy. So it's a little hard to figure out precisely what he is referring to, but he's following the instructions of the authorities on the ground, and if we learn more, we shall go back there immediately. All those people in on that site at the moment are still the police, any number of search and rescue personnel who've come in many cases from across the country, certainly from the adjacent states of Connecticut and New Jersey and Pennsylvania have been here. There have been any number of volunteers who've come. We've talked to people who've come and volunteered on the site who don't appear to have any current search and rescue training. We talked to a woman this morning whose husband, I think it was, or brother was involved, and he'd been in the Marine Corps for a long time, came along and volunteered his services, and so was immediately put to work. It may be that what is causing this order for some people in the area to evacuate is a gas leak. It is one of the things that they have had most to worry about. The city has done everything it can to turn off gas in all relevant places, but a gas leak under these demolished superstructures will not come as it's not a surprise, and just is a possibility. But as we continue to worry about this, let's focus a little more on the people. George Stephanopoulos told us a while ago that on those walls of honor in fire departments around New York City, there were several hundred, more than 300 names which were going to go up of men who were missing. The city has not been forthcoming. Sorry, I take that back. The city has not used numbers which are that high. Mayor Giuliani said earlier today, and I think it's the only number we've had from him, that 259 uniformed personnel were missing, and in that he included police and firefighters. But the struggle for the firefighters in the second day of this, has been enormous. And ABC's John McKenzie has been with them.
New York City firefighters this afternoon, still trying to control pockets of fire, still struggling to hold back their emotions. Among the missing, at least 200 of their fellow firefighters, thought to be buried under the rubble. The city's fire chief is Thomas Von Essen.
We believe that many of them are gone.
When the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center collapsed, there were more than 400 firefighters at the scene, many of them inside the building, running up the stairs, trying to rescue people trapped on the upper floors.
But if they were up in the building, with the size of that fall and the fire and the smoke, it doesn't look good for them.
Some of the firefighters believed killed yesterday were not even scheduled to be working. They had just finished their shift, but when the alarm sounded, volunteered to rush to the scene. Among the confirmed dead, 2 of the highest-ranking officers in the New York City Fire Department. One of them had helped rescue efforts after the Oklahoma City bombing. Also killed one of the department's Roman Catholic chaplains who had raced to the scene to comfort victims.
I talked to their families, and I explained to them that they were working very hard and they were working at what they love to do. And I'm sure their efforts will end up having saved other lives. And their families can be very proud of them.
This afternoon, the search operation continues, haltingly. John Clary is among the firefighters digging through the top layer of rubble.
Right now, it's not too good. You got a lot of heavy debris. We're really just on top of the pile. We can't even, there's just a lot of crevices and holes, things you can look down into. You really can't see. The visibility is real poor. A lot of smoke, a lot of heat coming off of the debris.
Clary, like the other firefighters here, gets a few minutes rest, a bit of water, something quick to eat, and then it's back to work, sifting through the soot and debris.
I have to go back in there. I got some personal friends of mine in there trapped too, firefighters.
John McKenzie, ABC News, New York.
We all, of course, have, I shouldn't say all, but a great many of us have personal friends who are missing their relatives in the trade tower, and it may be that we'll be able to give you some information on how to get a better handle on that in just a while, because many companies who work in the Trade Center try to put together lists and connections of people who are interested in family and in friends. Bob Jameson is downtown in Manhattan at the moment. Do you have a sense, Bob, of what's going on recently with that measure of concern?
Yes, Peter, it appears from here on the roof of a building some blocks away from where the World Trade Centers used to be, the picture that you're seeing now, that what is left of the South Tower, #1 World Trade Center, and some of that was left after it collapsed inside itself yesterday, as you will remember, that part of that is being pulled down now by an orange crane. I'm not sure you can see that in the picture. We can see it from our vantage point. It is unclear whether it is being pulled down because they are fearful that the entire structure is going to collapse and they're trying to control it, although that would seem logical, or if they are removing parts of it. But of course that would seem to be in conflict with the way buildings in disasters like this are carefully taken apart to look for survivors.
Thanks very much, Bob Jameson. As you've been talking, I have been just turned to my computer here to look at a website that Nancy Gabriner, my associate, just sent us, which I think that people in a variety of places may find useful. There is, it turns out, and I didn't realize this until a few moments ago, something called the World Trade Center Survivor Database. And I'll just read briefly from the top of it here. It says, in an effort to help people find out about their loved ones, we're building an online list of survivors. Do not use the list for a missing person or for a search. We're editing out false entries as fast as we can. Please bear with us. If you notice false entries, send an email to the editor. You can read all this your stuff, but what it does appear to have here is a list which is regenerated, as they put it, every 10 minutes. In alphabetical order of people, listed in alphabetical order of people who at this website, which I think must have something to do with the city, I may be wrong, is being, you can have access to. And it is www.ny.com/WTCLIS. World Trade Center list, WTCLIS.HTML. I have no idea if that is, we'll get that printed up so we can put it up on the screen. I have no idea if that's helpful to people around the country, but we are getting so many queries from people around the country who have some connection. Said it many times, 50,000 people work in the area of the Trade Center building. There is, we can't see the chaos as well as we'd like to be able to see, but there continues to be now measured chaos in this second day. This day after has all of the dimensions in many respects of the first, minus the impact, the immediate impact of the tragedy itself. But here in the city of New York and elsewhere around the country, people are trying to gather themselves together. And government is certainly trying to do that, and so we asked ABC's Carol Simpson in Washington to put together a report on how Washington is dealing with the second day.
As the sun rose above some of America's most revered monuments, the nation's capital tried to return to some degree of normalcy. The U.S. government was back in business, but traffic into the District of Columbia was lighter than usual. Federal employees made their way back to their jobs, with the smell of acrid smoke from the still smoldering Pentagon a chilling reminder of yesterday's horror. Security was tight at all government buildings. Cars were checked for bombs. People checked for proper identification.
Obviously, everyone around is a little more solemn than normal.
It reminded me of what I imagined the end of the world would look like, just people scrambling, trying to save their lives.
You would have thought nothing was wrong in downtown Washington until you saw National Guardsmen and military vehicles on nearly every intersection. A reminder that the city is still under a state of emergency. As for the busiest place in town, it was the headquarters of the American Red Cross. Hundreds of people waited in line for hours to give blood, many of them local college students.
Short of enlistment, this is probably the best thing young people can do.
And across the city, churches opened their doors for special prayer vigils. At Metropolitan AME Church, they cried and prayed for the victims and their families.
And Lord, we also ask that you send your angels to the...
We'll come back to Washington and the day after in Washington, and we do not want to interrupt people's prayers, but this is the scene in Lower Manhattan now. Clearly people have got the message now that something is happening. George Stephanopoulos was absolutely right. We do not know what it is. George, can you hear me? Okay, George Stephanopoulos cannot hear me as well. Bob Jameson, can you hear me and can you see what is going on? Can you see what is going on?
Yes.
So what do you think is happening?
Peter, are we on? It appears that they are taking down even more of what's left of number 1 World Trade Center, or the South Tower, and it appears that it's coming down more quickly than they can control it.
Okay, thanks very much, Bob. This is a reminder that when Cynthia McFadden was talking to one of the emergency relief doctors, the emergency service doctors had been in on the actual rubble itself and on the periphery of it early today. I recall he said that I think he said at one point that there had been 40 buildings in the immediate area of the trade towers that had sustained some kind of damage, and the concussion damage that will have been caused by the 2 towers coming down with the force they did, it is understandable that there has been what the military sometimes calls collateral damage. But it's a little hard to understand from this picture because you see people running from one area, standing on another, and I'm afraid neither Bob Jameson, who's closer than I am, nor I can add significantly to our or your understanding of this. So I'd like to go back to the Carol Simpson piece, which we interrupted, I think, at a point when she was pointing out that in Washington today, not only did people large number of people line up to give blood, but many people have gone to churches as well.
And Lord, we also ask that you send your angels to the victims, Lord. That you escort him to your heavenly kingdom.
However, like everywhere else in the city, there was a sense that the United States has to do something. They ended the service with the battle hymn of the Republic.
Glory, glory, hallelujah.
Carol Simpson, ABC News, Washington.
The Reuters news agency is reporting at the moment, and it's a little hard every time you look at the skyline there, and that's as seen from across the Hudson River now, that Reuters is reporting that the remnants of one Liberty Plaza in the World Trade Center have collapsed. Now, again, we don't know that that was a planned collapse or one they anticipated, whether it was done deliberately in order to facilitate a search and rescue operation. We are, I'm afraid, as ignorant as you are, and we'll try to find out precisely what one Liberty Plaza in the World Trade Center actually is. While this has been going on in New York, the operations continue at the Pentagon in Washington, and ABC's Jackie Judd has been reporting on that.
D7 that slammed into the Pentagon carried 64 people, among them 3 children from Washington, D.C. elementary and middle schools and 3 of their teachers. All were headed to an ecology conference sponsored by National Geographic. Leslie Whittington was on board along with her husband, Charles Falkenberg, and their 2 young daughters. Whittington had been a professor of public policy at Georgetown University, a busy academic who with her family was headed to Australia so she could teach at a university there.
And she sure as hell touched me. She was an energetic, powerful, dynamic, strong-willed, passionate, caring lady with a dynamite sense of humor and love of life. And God, she is a loss to humanity.
Part of her biography says Leslie Whittington's free time is consumed by the PTA, swim team, and carpooling responsibilities. Karen Kincaid, 40 years old, was on board. She was a communications lawyer, described by her boss as an up-and-coming star, a decent, self-effacing person. The pilot of Flight 77, David Charlevoix, a Washington resident, a friend, broken-hearted, reached briefly on the phone, simply said he was a wonderful person. And there was Barbara Olson. She was a frequent guest on talk shows. She was a lawyer and author, a passionate conservative, the wife of the Solicitor General Ted Olson. Her last words to her husband in a call made from the doomed plane were, "What should I do? What should I do?" Jackie Judd, ABC News, Washington.
Up to date on what a struggle this day has been for military families and of course also other families, because it wasn't just the military which was involved. It was of course not just the military that was involved in this attack on the Pentagon. A number of people, including the wife of the Solicitor General, are lost in that aircraft. That's that Stars and Stripes that we referred to some hours ago, that the search and rescue teams, the firemen there on top of the south end of the Pentagon, had put up today. Now, President Bush is going to go to the Pentagon this afternoon, I believe, Terry Moran, to share this tragedy with the people themselves. Am I correct?
That's it exactly, Peter. It's a desire that he has and has told his staff he very much wants to do. And so despite the continuing concerns about his safety, a motorcade is lining up right now to take the president across the river to the Pentagon, where we are told he wants to meet personally with rescue workers, with people who work in the Pentagon, with the whole community of the people who work there, and express his condolences, his solidarity, and his thanks for the people who are engaged in that heroic work there. This is something that the White House has kept under wraps all day. They are still concerned about his movements. They said earlier, as we've reported, that they now have credible information that the plane that hit the Pentagon, they say, its original target was the White House, and that Air Force One was also a target. So although security is very tight around the president, he is making a point of getting out, showing himself, showing the flag, and sharing this moment with the people of the Pentagon.
Terry, you raised several issues I'd like to just explore with you, but before we do, can I just talk to people who've been looking at this sense of urgency that occurred around the World Trade Center in New York just a few minutes ago. We now believe that what actually happened was that the remaining portion of the South World Trade Center, that's the tower which was closest to New York Harbor, has collapsed. We believe that anyone there who examined the structural difficulties after the building collapsed perhaps knew in advance it was going to happen, and certainly knew that it was a possibility, but that is the scene in lower New York at the moment, after we are told the remaining portion, which was not very much, as you know, of the South World Trade Center tower, has collapsed. Now, Terry, you said the president was going to go to the Pentagon despite the continuing concern about his safety. Is the White House really still concerned about his safety?
Well, they don't want to articulate too much of a concern. They do want to communicate to the country that the government is back and running, although, as the president himself said, it's not business as usual. And officials are saying behind the scenes that they are still concerned, that this is a live situation here. But this is something that the president himself has decided to do based on an assessment of the level of risk provided to him by the Secret Service.
On what basis is the White House still concerned about his safety? Do we know?
Well, they aren't saying, Peter. They earlier today, White House Press Secretary Ari Fleischer said that it was the administration's feeling and belief that because these attacks were carefully planned, obviously carefully coordinated, and had been executed, that therefore they believed that the threat to the country was concluded. That is no longer the line here. They are saying that the situation is still being monitored, and so they have backed off what was a sense of finality about this tragedy and about these attacks that they were uttering this morning.
And I do know that Ari Fleischer did say to you earlier that the White House believes that the attack on the Pentagon, the attack involving United Flight 93, a 757, had as its... Let's just stop for a second, Terry. I think there's something else quite majestic going on here at the moment. And so it is just... Let's just sit for a second and watch these firefighters walk this American flag, this large American flag, across the roof of the Pentagon, where they have worked so hard for the last 24 hours and more to rescue people, and we believe not as many people perished in the Pentagon as had originally thought. It may be that they're going to unfurl this flag when the president arrives, but let's just put it up there. Let's keep it on part of the screen for a moment, if we may, because it's a reflection. It's a reflection of the association with the flag that is just doesn't exist in any other country that I know of, and have been in quite a lot of them, as there is here. Many countries have deep feelings about their flag and use it in a variety of ways. But today, for example, in the last 24 hours, sales of American flags all across the country have skyrocketed, as have sales of small pieces of bunting and ribbon in red, white, and blue. And I think it was Kmart, somebody will nod knowingly at me, which told us a short while ago that 88,000 American flags had been sold in their stores today all across the country. And early today, when White House tourists had lined up at the White House trying to get into the White House, I beg your pardon, yesterday, people were at the White House for a long time, and then people were allowed back into the White House in part today, and as they went through, they were given small American flags. And you can go anywhere in the country today, we know it without ever moving from this newsroom, and knowing that there has been an American flag newly planted on a front lawn, or hanging from a porch, or perhaps a car aerial, and it simply does not occur. Mind you, these circumstances don't occur with such alarming clarity in other nations as well, or has not occurred with such clarity in other nations as well. So let's just continue to watch this moment. Terry, I know that Ari Fleischer said to you earlier today that the White House believes that the United flight, the 757, which crashed in, I beg your pardon, the 757 which crashed into the Pentagon, they believe the original target was the White House. Now, did he mean that, because it wasn't clear listening to the Attorney General, or did they mean that the White House was also a target? Can we clarify that at all?
Yes, he did. He indicated in unequivocal terms that that plane, which ended up crashing into the Pentagon, was originally intended, according to the specific and credible information, and that is a phrase that government officials, as you know, use in order to indicate that they are basing it on intelligence sources, live intelligence sources, that information led them to believe that that plane was headed for the White House originally. Why it diverted to the Pentagon, we don't know, but we can tell you it had a very unusual path, not only because it hit the Pentagon, but it did sort of circle around the Capitol building. There's some speculation that perhaps it couldn't find the White House. If you've flown into Washington, you know that the White House is nestled in this beautiful national park of a place here, and it may be that it was just hard to find for them, but that's what they're saying. And on the subject of the flag, if I may, Peter, you're so right about the spontaneous nature of Americans' love for the flag. All day, up and down the famous fence in front of the White House, people have just marched silently with flags. I just saw 4 children walking with a big flag, and there is a small gathering of people out there right now just standing, holding an American flag.
Okay, Terry, now let me go on, if I may, about this investigation. Mr. Fleischer also said there was a credible threat by the commercial jets involved to Air Force One, and yet the president was in Florida and Louisiana and Nebraska when these events occurred in the New York-Washington area. What did he mean by they posed a credible threat to Air Force One?
Well, once again, he did not want to go too far down the path of telling us what the nature of the information was or why they felt Air Force One was under threat. We know that it was accompanied on its last leg and possibly as well its earlier legs as well by fighter jets. Ann Compton, who was on that plane, said it flew at an unusually high altitude. She said 40,000 feet. It is apparent that the White House believed that these planes that were hitting buildings, maybe one of them, perhaps the one that crashed in Pennsylvania, was originally intended to take out Air Force One. That's all we can go on because they aren't going any farther.
And yet the president and Air Force One were in Florida at the time of these attacks on New York and Washington.
Yes, he was in Florida and took off, originally intending, it seems, to head back to Andrews, but then diverted to Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. The question was asked repeatedly, why take off if there's a threat? And obviously they have a plan, a system in place, and they felt that the safest place for him was 40,000 feet up with some F-16s around him.
Okay, thanks, Terry Moran at the White House. And we know when, these are questions I think are going to get asked time and time again about the threat, in part because people are still uncertain what happened to United Flight 93, and that's the one that was originally scheduled to fly from Newark to San Francisco and which crashed near Johnstown, Pennsylvania. So these questions are going to be asked, I think, time and again, and Mr. Fleischer put this on the table today, and as Terry says, doesn't want to go any farther with it at the moment, but there were certainly a good number of questions about it at the White House briefing earlier today. Now, Terry, do we know when the president precisely is going to go to the Pentagon?
In a matter of minutes. He was scheduled to leave at 5. He was scheduled to leave several minutes ago. The motorcade is still lined up over there. His day has been packed, as you can imagine. Congressional leaders have been over here. He's been meeting with national security officials. He's been on the phone all day with world leaders, and so it's understandable he's running a little late.
It's pretty clear, I shouldn't say it's pretty clear that this is being put up specifically for the president, but it's coincidental. It coincides with the president's visit to the Pentagon, and whatever it is, as Terry has said, and I think we all agree, another expression of Americans' deep affection for the flag, and how it helps to sustain the national vigor and the national sense of purpose and will at a time like this when so much of the world has its eye on America. A couple of items about financial markets here today. The U.S. financial markets are going to open as early as Friday and no later than Monday. The chairman and CEO of the New York Stock Exchange, Dick Grasso, who speaks publicly, among other things, on behalf of the New York Stock Exchange, says there are a number of factors in the decision. Foremost, the rescue and the cleanup effort is still underway, and the New York Stock Exchange and other markets do not want to insert a large number of people into the area because it's not very far away from the Wall Street is not very far away from the trade towers. Do not want a large number of people in the area while the rescue and cleanup operation goes on, or at least is in its initial stages, because it is very clear from anybody who's looked at the site, and certainly from the city and state authorities today, that we are in the middle of something in New York City, and the whole nation is engaged in the middle of it, which is going to go on for a very, very long period of time. The search for survivors will go on for a long period of time. The search for clues at what is a crime scene will go on for a very long period of time. But the New York Stock Exchange also wants to check all of the buildings in the area for safety and for soundness. And there are, so says Mr. Grasso, operational and communications issues. I assume connecting the exchange to the various brokerage houses and to other exchanges around the world, which need to work out. And Ramona Schindelheim, who's our economics editor, points out in an email to us just now that the last time the New York Stock Exchange was closed for 2 unscheduled days was VJ Day at the end of World War II, victory over Japan at the end of World War II. But there's a huge number of people there on the site in New York now working to see whatever they can do at the moment. And this sense of relaxation as firefighters and rescue workers come and go is not manifest itself the closer you get to the site. You're seeing shift changes here, you're seeing volunteers come, you're seeing firefighters are too exhausted in many cases to move in a hurry. And there's a huge amount of heavy equipment on the ground at the moment. And there you see, I think what you see there actually is an acetylene torch trying to separate two pieces of steel. John Nance, our aviation analyst, is with us at the moment. John, this business that Mr. Fleischer has introduced, that the White House may have been a target. How might they have arrived at this conclusion? Is there something that you can tell by looking at flight plans? Clearly it may have been information they picked up from supporters, if there are supporters in the country, of the men who are the terrorists themselves. Is there anything you pick up off the aircraft itself?
Peter, I don't understand how they could have triangulated on this, other than perhaps they found something in the car that they took or in some of the materials that they found there. Maybe there was some statement that was made from those phone calls from the aircraft, although I seriously doubt that they would have announced their intentions. But no, that's a puzzlement to me too, because the flight path of the aircraft, unless they had made a flight path at one point directly at the White House and then for some reason pulled up, I'm not sure why they would have, or Mr. Fleischer would have, with such certainty made such a statement. It certainly is a chilling thought. We also, of course, have the conundrum of Flight 93, the one that crashed in Pennsylvania, and the fact that it was headed both in a combination for the Camp David area, but also for the Washington, D.C. area. And when you look at the twin, or actually 3 or 4 targets that would be the most visible and the most disastrous for us in the United States, the Capitol, the White House, the Pentagon, the Washington Monument, all of that becomes extremely chilling in terms of the fact that there was yet another one out there.
John, let me ask you just in terms of tracking the aircraft itself, if you can tell anything. Yesterday we managed to get basically what had happened to at least one of the hijacked aircraft out of Boston. We saw it being tracked by ground communications down and circling around and increasing its power and decreasing buzz, but I've never seen anything yet which indicates the flight path of the aircraft that ultimately hit the Pentagon.
I'm sure that, and I haven't either, Peter, and I'm looking forward to it. I've seen one depiction that I think we did in graphics that show it going out to the west and then turning around and coming back on a certain path. But whether or not that's a direct radar track, I don't know. Certainly, if all of these aircraft had their transponders turned off, they still are what we call skin painted. In other words, the radar beams as they go past the aircraft will hit the aircraft. They're big objects, obviously. They're not stealth aircraft, so they will ping back a radar return, and air traffic control's radars can see them. They just don't have the additional information. So I don't think there was at any point in time, except perhaps at low altitude towards the last, that air traffic control might have lost them. And even then, in the Washington area, the radar coverage is very good down to, let's say, 500 to 1,000 feet, I believe, from past experience in what we call the terminal approach control area.
So your point, I think, is as in so many incidents involving aircraft, we're going to know a lot more than we do today when they triangulate, as we say, all the various pieces of information, because there's so much electronic information around, isn't there, about what aircraft are doing?
Do you remember off Mauritius and also with the Egypt Air situation, we were able to triangulate, and in fact with John F. Kennedy Jr.'s tragic loss and the 2 women, we were able to triangulate 7 or 8 different radar traces and come up with an incredibly good 3-dimensional picture, even though there was not a lot of hard data from the transponder on that airplane. Yeah, I think in this case in Washington, D.C., there are many different radars rotating around looking at anything flying through that airspace. And when all this information is in, I think we'll have an extremely good track on the speed, the altitude, the headings at all points in time.
Thanks very much, John Nance. I apologize. I'm half listening to my colleagues in the field and half trying to read the emails which are coming in, because there's now, well, not now, there has been since the beginning of this an enormous amount of email traffic involving the incidents themselves, involving people in search for missing relatives and friends. I was just looking at one now which supplements some of the information we had about United Airlines Flight 93, which John Nance and I have been talking about, and this is this recounts the story of one Jeremy Glick, who was on United Flight. When realized that they were in trouble and the hijackers took control of the flight, he called his niece, who in turn teleconferenced him into 911. Jeremy Glick apparently told the police there were 3 terrorists with knives, which we'd heard certainly before in this case, but also a large red box that they claimed contained a bomb. And this young man, according to this email, which I think comes from a member of his family, tracked by their description second by second details and relayed them to the police by phone. Maybe there's a clue in there ultimately in the information that the police have, because 911 in every part of the country I think actually records the information that comes in. But after several minutes describing the scene, according to this email, Mr. Glick and several other passengers decided there was nothing to lose by rushing the hijackers. And there's no more in terms of detail. And then the family goes on to say, although Flight 93 crashed outside Plattsburgh with the loss of all souls, Jeremy and the other patriotic heroes saved the lives of many people on the ground that would have died if the terrorists had been able to complete their mission. And there's the flag outside the Pentagon. I rather wish we'd caught that as it gone down, and maybe we did on tape. But there it is. That's what the firefighters were doing. They were putting a flag on the side of the Pentagon. I thought for a moment they were going to put it on the roof, which the president, if he comes, we're not sure the president will come to this, but certainly everybody in the White House will be able to see on the side, this is the south side of the Pentagon, where American Airlines Flight 77 crashed into it, leaving that huge gash on the left. And what is that? A display of love, affection, defiance, pride, commitment, patriotism, as we have talked about in the last 10 or 15 minutes. Let's go back to the White House to Terry Moran and see whether or not the president is on his way. Terry? Okay, Terry Moran's on the phone at the moment, and maybe Terry's the president on his way?
Yes, Peter.
Is the president on his way?
No, he's not. The motorcade is still here, and so he is obviously still tied up in the business of managing this situation, but he does want to go. We're told he intends to go. All
right, so while we're waiting for him to go, just give us a feel for the rest of the day at the White House. The president has spoken today. I'm going to go back to my notes, and you probably have yours in your memory. But among the things the president said today, that these men who commit these acts of terror are indeed acts of war. This is a different enemy. They operate in the shadows, and they have no regard for human life. And so the message from the president and other members of the government is very consistent today. But is this the only business that's getting done in the White House today?
Almost exclusively, Peter. This is what the domestic policy staff, obviously the foreign policy staff, the president's personal staff are all focused on. What the White House has become is the central clearinghouse and coordinating point for all the actions of the federal government in this area. They are providing the president with the fullest and most up-to-date information about the activities of the government, the investigation, the search and rescue, the emergency response, the transportation issues, and they are coordinating that, making sure that agencies don't step on each other, making sure that they get the resources they need. And I must say, in general, one gets the sense that the president, while he has escalated his rhetoric, talking about an act of war today, is proceeding, and this administration is proceeding, in a very measured fashion, in part consulting with allies, consulting with members of Congress here, and there is no sense at all of a rush or even an eagerness to strike back, but rather a determination to fix the target and make sure that this gets done right. I was told that the first thing the president told FBI Director Mueller yesterday when he talked to him was stay calm and get after it. And that is essentially the mood here.
One of the touching scenes today, Terry, was to see Mrs. Bush go over to Walter Reed Army Hospital today to talk to people over there. This is a first lady who has not made very many public appearances since the beginning of the administration, and she went over today and talked to people from her heart about children and about the commitment that people have made in the rescue operation. It was a very lovely thing to see.
It was indeed, Peter, and it reminds us, and we've picked up indications of it here, that just as families all across the country have been touched and moved and heartbroken by these scenes, the First family has as well. Even while the president was on board Air Force One, he was reaching out to his wife, he was reaching out to his children to make sure that they were safe. They were taken to a secure area as well. And in fact, when he came home, Mrs. Bush was here to meet him, and they retired very briefly to a private moment together.
Okay, Terry, thanks very much. We had a quick glimpse of Mrs. Bush over there, and indeed, she, among other things, she had talked about how you talk to your children about the circumstances like this, and she said, sit down, make sure you talk to them, make sure you do as much as you can to help them understand that they are safe. We finally got George Stephanopoulos back in Lower Manhattan. George?
Well, Peter, I'm a little farther north in Manhattan right now. I'm up at Duane and Greenwich Street, which is still several blocks north of the World Trade Center zone, which is now called a new collapse zone. Apparently, officials there are worried that several buildings in that area may collapse. Sensors have been attached to these buildings. The authorities started to detect some movement in some of them. We've heard varying reports on which buildings they're most worried about. The Millennium Hotel, One Liberty Plaza, a building on the south side of the plaza on Greenwich Avenue. We can't be sure which one they're most concerned about, but what we know for certain right now is that authorities are worried that some of those buildings or one of those buildings may collapse, so they've asked everyone to leave the area. And of course, Peter, after yesterday's events and so many rescue workers getting caught up in the rubble, no one here is taking any chances, and they were evacuating people immediately.
Wire services, George, that reported that in fact what had actually happened down there was that the remainder of the southern tower had collapsed. Does that make sense to you?
Peter, it's probably both, to tell you the truth. There were cranes working on the southern tower, and they may have pulled down part of that, and there was a fire, as I reported earlier, inside that structure. But in addition to whatever is happening to that southern tower skeleton, there is also a concern among authorities here about other buildings being in danger of collapse.
Number on the number of buildings which are in danger of being affected. I don't expect you to be particularly accurate, but we did hear from one doctor who'd been in on the inside. He said he thought he'd heard that 40 buildings had been affected.
When I was inside, Peter, I didn't see that many, but I certainly saw 5 or 6, which had such severe damage I could never imagine them ever being rebuilt. And you don't know what's happening inside those buildings, even as you're looking at them from the outside. But clearly, Peter, even beyond that square right around the World Trade Center, there were buildings even farther out with windows blown out and other kinds of damage.
Thank you, George. As a reminder of the atmosphere down there, as you were talking, a young woman walked past George and turned around the corner, of course, wearing a face mask, as a lot of people are in downtown Manhattan today, because the air is just poisonous with dust and soot and everything else that has just simply been the result of this explosion. Got a couple minutes before the top of the hour to hear quickly from Betsy Stark on the status of the financial markets generally. Betsy, people in the United States today who wanted to trade or have the need to trade. Oh, it is. Okay. Should we hang on for a second then? Okay. My apologies. Betsy Stark has prepared a piece for us, and we won't get it in just before we break and re-invite many stations to join us from around the country in terms of their local news. But let me then tell you also that the Secretary of State spoke today at considerable length about what the United States has done in terms of reaching out to communicate with the rest of the world. He's talked to about everybody. He talked to the Secretary General of the United Nations. There'd been a UN resolution in support of the United States. Very interesting thing in terms of the North Atlantic Treaty Alliance, the Western Alliance, which the U.S. leads, and the other members of the NATO alliance had agreed today in invoking one of the articles of the alliance, Article 5, that an attack on the United States would be regarded as an attack on the alliance as a whole, raising a whole new list of questions about what happens if the United States is able to identify at some point that some government has been a participant in all this. I apologize. Mr. Powell also talked to various leaders around the world. He talked to Mr. Putin, as did the President Bush talk to President Putin in Russia today. He talked to the Israeli Prime Minister, Ariel Sharon. He talked to Yasser Arafat, the President of the Palestinian Authority. Very relevant conversations given all of the violence in that today. The only person who we've notably not talked to, we could tell, was General Pervez Musharraf, who is the military leader in Pakistan, and there is some serious question now about the sentiments in Pakistan tonight vis-a-vis the Taliban in next-door Afghanistan and support for any moves like this, but it's a little too early to nail any of this down. But we are going to pause for a few seconds now to allow local stations who are going to go to their local news to do that, and our coverage here will continue.